Subscribe to our channel for right now so you don't miss more stories filled with drama and unexpected twists. Imagine this moment. You're at the most exclusive restaurant in the city, with your lover, basking in the arrogance of a man who believes he's won it all. And then you see your ex-wife, not a broken, suffering woman, but one laughing heartily, deep in conversation with the city's most powerful CEO. This is what happened to Ethan Rhodes, and everything is about to fall apart. This is the story of Natalie Caldwell, or Natalie Vance, as we'll call her from now on, who thought her tumultuous divorce from Ethan Rhodes was the end of all her sorrows. She had already walked through the fire, scorched by betrayal, embraced by humiliation, and stood in the ashes of a love she once believed was unbreakable. She endured the crushing deceit, the shame of gossip in her elite social circle, and the bitterness of watching her ex-husband flaunt his new life of luxury with a seductive mistress at his side. Every magazine headline, every whisper at charity galas, every paparazzi photo of Ethan embracing another woman had been a fresh wound, until she forced herself to feel nothing at all. Months later, a chance encounter in the dazzling lobby of a five-star restaurant is about to turn everything upside down. They believed it was all settled, because the very night Ethan walks in, his lover on his arm, radiating the arrogance of a man who thinks he has won, he discovers that Natalie has not just survived. She's thriving, laughing with a powerful CEO, not alone or broken, but radiant. And that realization hits him like a punch to the gut. Sparks will fly, old wounds will reopen, and shocking secrets will come to light. The beginning and the betrayal. Natalie Vance was raised with all the right manners, attended the best schools, and lived with the expectation that she would have a perfect, movie-like life. Her parents, Jonathan and Elaine Vance, had built a comfortable existence in New York, ensuring Natalie never wanted for anything. She was raised to be a woman who inspired envy, not pity, a wife to be cherished, not discarded. But life had other plans. Ironically, it was that same upbringing that put her in the orbit of Ethan Rhodes, a charming, ambitious man from a humble background who was determined to climb the social and financial ladder. They met at a charity gala in a grand ballroom, a whirlwind of chandeliers and champagne. Ethan was an emerging tech entrepreneur at the time, brimming with restless energy. There was an instant spark. Natalie found his drive refreshing, a stark contrast to the air of entitlement she often encountered. He made her feel alive, as if she were entering a love story that defied expectations. He, in turn, admired her poise and her connections. They were an unlikely pair, but for a few sweet years, it seemed they were building a true partnership. However, success can be a double-edged sword. Ethan's tech startup soared beyond his wildest dreams, transforming him into a rising star among venture capitalists. He was soon a millionaire, rubbing shoulders with celebrities and financiers, always on the hunt for the next big deal. The man who once whispered forever in her ear began to speak only of stock options, acquisitions, and market share. As his fortune grew, so did the pressures and temptations. Natalie couldn't pinpoint the exact moment the marriage cracked, but it started with late-night meetings that became weekend business trips. At first, she told herself it was normal, that all great men had to make sacrifices, that she could be patient. In time, Ethan's once warm gaze toward her chilled into distant courtesy. When rumors of his infidelity first reached Natalie's ears, she dismissed them as insignificant gossip. After all, she was his wife, his partner, the woman who had believed in him before the world did. She wanted to believe Ethan was still the man who used to send her silly texts from across a crowded room just to tell her he loved her. But lies have a way of seeping through even the strongest walls. By their 4th anniversary, she could no longer deny the changes in him, the absence, the secrecy, the perfume on his collar that wasn't hers. And now, as he sits in the heart of the city's most exclusive restaurant, his laughter ringing in stark contrast to the hollow, fragile silence that once filled their marital home, Ethan Rhodes is about to learn a truth that should terrify any man who ever underestimated the woman he betrayed. The fallout and the new path. Friends whispered about a mysterious woman seen in Ethan's luxury car, or a pair of extravagantly sexy high heels found at his penthouse office. Every day, the feeling of betrayal deepened. A year ago, after tearful confrontations and painful revelations, they finally divorced. The legal battle was brief. Ethan offered a substantial settlement, as if money could wash away the guilt. Bitter and heartbroken, Natalie retreated to her parents' home for a while, licking her wounds in relative privacy. The tabloids caught wind of the divorce, painting it as another fairy tale union that had soured. In the immediate aftermath, Ethan seemed to rejoice in his bachelor status, being photographed by paparazzi at exclusive clubs. He was typically seen with a statuesque brunette on his arm. Her name, it turned out, was Victoria Green, an aspiring model from a small town, hungry for a taste of the good life. She clung to him in paparazzi photos, her expressions sultry, a sharp contrast to Natalie's more refined style. Natalie tried to ignore the whirlwind of rumors about how happy Ethan was. Instead, she focused on rebuilding her life. She took on a new job, coordinating philanthropic events for a major NGO, pouring herself into the charity work. In those volunteer circles, she found a sense of purpose that numbed the sting of her broken marriage. Still, no amount of philanthropic triumphs or supportive friends could completely banish the hurt. In quiet moments, she would remember how she and Ethan had once dreamed of traveling the world together, raising a family, and forging their own charitable ventures. Now, all that was left was a string of regrets and a white gold wedding band gathering dust in her jewelry box. It was during one of those philanthropic events that she crossed paths with Robert Sterling, a handsome, self-made CEO with an international chain of high-end hotels. She was planning a major fundraiser for an education charity, and Robert's conglomerate had pledged a significant donation. Over weeks of collaboration, Robert proved to be more than a distant businessman. Surprisingly, he was a down-to-earth person, with a kind smile that reached his hazel eyes. Although Natalie was cautious with alpha types after her ordeal with Ethan, Robert's respectful attention slowly wore down her defenses. One afternoon, after a successful charity gala, Robert invited her to dinner. She hesitated, feeling the familiar pang of vulnerability. But something in Robert's sincerity made her say yes. He promised to keep it informal, just two professionals celebrating a job well done. She had no idea that the dinner would become the stage for a dramatic confrontation. Nor did she suspect that her ex-husband and his lover would be dining at the very same restaurant, their worlds colliding in a way none of them could have foreseen. The collision. Nobody could have anticipated it. High-end restaurants in New York often boasted opulent decor, but Le Jardin took luxury to another level. The establishment was known for its gold-leaf ceiling, hand-blown glass chandeliers, and a waiting list that could last for months. Patrons paid thousands of dollars for a single meal, savoring ingenious dishes prepared by a Michelin-starred chef. For the city's elite, this wasn't just a restaurant. It was a statement. A place where power dined, where fortunes were flaunted, and where appearances mattered more than the food on the plate. Ethan Rhodes walked in with Victoria Green on his arm. He was accustomed to turning heads in such environments, and tonight was no exception. Dressed in a sleek Italian suit, he exuded the confidence of a man who had conquered the business world. He moved with the ease of someone who had spent years perfecting the role of success, every gesture measured, every glance calculated. The hostess, recognizing him as a VIP client, escorted them to an exclusive corner table near the panoramic window overlooking the city skyline. Ethan felt a flush of pride as other diners glanced their way, a tangible reminder of his success. The murmur of admiration, the subtle nods from other powerful men. It was all fuel for the image he had meticulously built. Victoria, wrapped in a figure-hugging black dress, sipped from a champagne flute. She shot an adoring glance at Ethan, all too aware that half the dining room was watching them. This was precisely the kind of glamorous life she had always coveted. Caviar, champagne, and a wealthy partner who lavished her with luxurious gifts. For her, luxury wasn't just comfort. It was validation. She savored every second, from the hushed whisper of the maitre d' as he addressed them to the whirlwind of paparazzi that sometimes lurked outside. She wanted to be envied, to be desired, for the world to see that she had secured her place at a man like Ethan Rhodes's side. Meanwhile, on the other side of the restaurant, the hostess was guiding Robert Sterling and Natalie Vance to an equally exclusive table. Robert, possessing the quiet confidence of a man who had built an empire from scratch, wore a perfectly tailored navy suit. Unlike Ethan's carefully curated presence, Robert's confidence was effortless, unaffected by the need to impress. Natalie glided alongside him in an elegant dark blue dress that highlighted her figure without being flashy. She was stunning, but not in a way that demanded attention. Rather, she carried an aura of quiet strength, a woman who had been broken and had rebuilt herself stronger. She felt a mix of excitement and nerves. Robert was not only a supportive, philanthropic partner, but also a man she found increasingly intriguing. There was a stability about him, a kind of reliability that felt foreign after the chaos of her marriage. The table Robert had reserved was near the center of the dining room, giving them an unobstructed view of the extravagant surroundings. The soft candlelight danced on the polished silverware as they settled in. Neither of them noticed the sharp intake of breath that came from the other side of the room. Neither of them saw the moment when Ethan Rhodes turned his head and froze. The confrontation. Ethan felt his entire body on edge. He kept glancing toward Natalie's table, trying to gauge the level of intimacy between her and Robert Sterling. Was it a business dinner or something more? The way Robert leaned in, the way Natalie tilted her head toward him, it sent a prickle of irritation down Ethan's spine. Victoria, eager to exploit the drama, periodically whispered comments into Ethan's ear. "They look quite comfortable, don't they?" she mused, her voice dripping with amusement. "Oh, he must be paying for all those diamonds she's wearing." She was referring to the delicate diamond earrings that had once been a gift from Ethan himself. A part of him had hoped never to see them again, but there they were, sparkling against Natalie's skin. Did she still wear them because she liked them, or was it just that they matched the occasion? Not knowing ate at him. Her snide comments made Ethan's jaw clench tighter with each one. A part of him wanted to dismiss the jealousy as irrational. After all, wasn't he the one who ended things and moved on with Victoria? Wasn't he the one who had told himself that Natalie was just a chapter of his past? Yet seeing Natalie, in the glamorous glow of Le Jardin, looking more self-assured than ever, as she sat next to a man with as much, if not more, power and wealth, ignited a possessiveness he hadn't anticipated. She didn't look like a woman recovering from heartbreak. She looked like a woman who had already moved on. Finally, after picking at his caviar appetizer, Ethan decided he could no longer sit and watch. He rose from his chair, ignoring Victoria's half-smirk of triumph. "I'm going to go say hello," he announced, though the words felt forced even to himself, as if saying them aloud could make it seem casual. I'd like to keep things civilized. Victoria's red-painted lips twitched with amusement. Civilized? How boring, she purred. By all means, go and stir the pot. She swirled her wine lazily, watching him like a spectator at a show she'd been waiting to enjoy. A whirlwind of tension coiled in Ethan's chest as he weaved his way between the tables, trying not to look like a man on a mission. His heart thrummed in his ears, a strange sensation. He wasn't used to feeling so unstable. Within seconds, he was standing near Robert and Natalie's table. Up close, the scene was even more intimate than it had appeared from a distance. Robert was leaning in slightly as Natalie described something that made her eyes light up with passion. His hand grazed the stem of her wine glass, his fingers relaxed, his expression entirely at ease. Ethan cleared his throat. Natalie's gaze shot up, and the moment she recognized him, her expression shifted from surprise to composure, a layer of politeness sliding into place. For a brief second, something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, perhaps? Or something else? But as quickly as it appeared, it was gone, replaced by a cool, unreadable gaze. "Ethan," she said, inclining her head. "I didn't expect to see you here." Robert Sterling, who was in the middle of a soft laugh, fell silent. His hazel eyes blinked with curiosity as he sized up the newcomer. He had heard hints that Natalie's divorce had involved a wealthy tech entrepreneur, but he had never met Ethan Rhodes in person. Offering a polite nod, Robert extended a hand. "Good evening, I'm Robert Sterling." Ethan shook his hand, noting the firm grip that spoke of confidence. "Ethan Rhodes, I think we've both heard our names around town," he said. Beneath the superficial pleasantries, Ethan's thoughts churned. This is the man who has replaced me in Natalie's life. Natalie gathered her calm. "How have you been, Ethan?" she asked, genuinely hoping this encounter wouldn't turn ugly. She had hoped her ex-husband would not approach, but knew a confrontation of some kind was inevitable. Ethan forced a smile. "Busy as ever. Expanding business." His gaze slid across the gilded restaurant before landing back on her. "I see you're having a good night as well," he added, gesturing slightly, as if to highlight the extravagance he was so familiar with. Robert nodded, not missing Ethan's slight edginess. "Yes, we were celebrating a recent charity milestone. Natalie has been instrumental in raising funds for some new education initiatives." Ethan's lips tightened. He remembered a time when he and Natalie had done philanthropic work together, but that was before his empire soared and the time for genuine giving shrank. "That's great," he offered in a flat voice. Natalie caught the glint of resentment in Ethan's eyes. She recognized it from the last months of their marriage, an anger that bristled whenever he felt overshadowed or left behind. She tried to maintain a polite facade, bracing herself for him to say something hurtful. The last thing she wanted was a scene in front of Robert or the prying eyes of the restaurant's elite clientele. Just then, Victoria appeared behind Ethan, hooking an arm through his. She smiled sweetly, though her eyes glinted with malice. "Hello," she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand to Robert. "I'm Victoria Green, Ethan's companion." The emphasis on companion was not lost on Natalie. Victoria then turned to Natalie with a slight smirk. "And you must be the ex-wife. It's a pleasure to meet you. I've heard so much about you." Natalie remained poised. Even as her stomach churned, Natalie recognized Victoria from the tabloid photos. Sleek, model-like, the type of woman who thrived in the spotlight, unbothered by whispers of scandal. She was everything Natalie wasn't. Loud where Natalie was contained, bold where Natalie was serene. And yet, here they were, tangled in the same web. For a brief second, An image flashed through Natalie's mind. Victoria embracing Ethan in some glossy magazine feature, as reporters speculated if she had been the reason for their divorce. Now, that woman was standing inches away, a smug smile on her face, as if she had won. "Pleasure," Natalie said, forcing herself to remain civil. Robert observed the tension, his brow furrowed with concern. Without hesitation, he placed a supportive hand on Natalie's back. A simple gesture, but one that spoke volumes. A quiet reassurance. A statement. It was not lost on Ethan. His jaw tightened. The possessiveness he had fought to suppress all night surged to the surface, unwanted and unwelcome. "Since we've all been introduced, why don't you join us for a moment?" Robert suggested, trying to diffuse the awkwardness. "It's not every day we run into friends at Le Jardin." Natalie nearly choked on her champagne. Friends? That was very generous, but she managed to maintain a pleasant expression. Ethan, seeing an opportunity to assert some control, quickly accepted. Victoria shot a triumphant look at Natalie, as if she had just been invited into a personal ring where she could flaunt her hold over Ethan. Her manicured fingers brushed his wrist possessively, a deliberate display. Reluctantly, Natalie moved her chair to make room. Her heart hammered, her nerves frayed. This was a mistake, a disaster about to happen. Robert motioned for a waiter to bring additional chairs, unknowingly setting the stage for a whirlwind of emotions they were all ill-prepared for. As the new seating was arranged, the opulent setting became charged with tension. The mirrored walls reflected a quartet of people bound by messy threads of love, betrayal, and new, budding desires. It was like a cruel joke, a perfectly staged tableau of unfinished business. The staff discreetly retreated, sensing the friction. The next words exchanged at that table would shape their futures in ways none of them could have predicted. The final showdown and a new beginning, with all four gathered around a single table in the candlelight. The opulence of Le Jardin felt too close, too intense, like a gilded cage. The chandeliers overhead glimmered, casting a fractured light onto the crystal glasses and polished silverware. It felt almost theatrical, as if they were actors in some twisted social experiment. Natalie sat stiffly, wishing she were anywhere else. She could feel Ethan's gaze flickering between her and Robert, a silent challenge crackling in the air. Yet as Robert offered a gentle smile and motioned for the waiter to bring fresh wine glasses, she realized there was no elegant retreat. To leave abruptly would fan the flames of gossip, and Natalie Vance refused to be the woman who ran. Victoria wasted no time. She leaned forward, fluttering her eyelashes. "This place is absolutely stunning," she cooed, her voice as sweet as poisoned honey. Then, with a calculated air of innocence, she twisted the knife. "Ethan and I come here often, don't we, darling?" Natalie felt the words before she even processed them. Sharp, deliberate, meant to provoke. Ethan nodded curtly, his thoughts visibly elsewhere. For once, he wasn't playing into Victoria's theatrics. He was too preoccupied with watching Natalie. He kept glancing toward Robert, evaluating him, comparing their suits, their presences, even their mannerisms. The way Robert's fingers lightly grazed the stem of his wine glass, completely at ease. The way he tilted his body toward Natalie, as if she were the only person in the room worth paying attention to. Ethan hated it. His heart throbbed with the raw, unexpected jealousy he felt at seeing Robert's protective stance toward Natalie. Had he ever looked at her that way? Had he ever made her feel so safe, so desired? Or had he been too consumed with chasing more money, more status, more women, to notice what he was losing? Trying to salvage some civility, Robert cleared his throat. "I hear the chef here is putting together a new tasting menu soon. Perhaps we should try it sometime." A neutral topic, a lifeline. But beneath the polished words, the undercurrents remained. "Perhaps," he suggested, directing the comment more toward Natalie. Natalie forced a polite nod. She noticed that Victoria was studying Robert's watch, an exquisite piece of Swiss timekeeping worth more than some people's annual salaries, and felt a twist of annoyance. She's probably sizing him up in the same way she assessed Ethan, Natalie thought. That realization sparked a flicker of empathy for Ethan. Had Victoria latched onto him as soon as his star began to rise? Yet was that empathy enough to eclipse the pain of their past? Barely. Victoria took a delicate sip of her champagne. "Robert," she began, feigning casual interest. "It's Robert Sterling, right? CEO of Sterling Hotels?" Robert nodded. The corners of his mouth tightened just a fraction. "That's right. And you must be forging quite a path in the modeling world." Victoria's eyelashes fluttered. "Oh, well, I dabble in print ads once in a while, but mostly I'm involved in philanthropic causes with Ethan." She paused, letting the words sink in, much like Natalie used to do with Ethan. The stab was subtle, but the message was clear. "You're a thing of the past, Natalie. I've taken your place." Natalie's cheeks burned, but she held her composure. She refused to stoop to catty remarks, even if her stomach was churning with rage. Robert gently touched Natalie's hand under the table, a small gesture of reassurance. She appreciated it more than words could say. Ethan, however, noticed the movement, and his eyes glinted with something akin to regret. Had he really pushed away someone who genuinely cared about him for a woman who seemed to be fascinated by status and wealth? He decided to redirect the conversation. "So, Robert, I understand you're expanding into Southeast Asia soon. Must be a huge undertaking." Robert responded with professional ease, describing his new hotels in Singapore and Hong Kong, the philanthropic programs his company sponsored for local communities, and the complexities of working across different cultures. Natalie chimed in, referencing her experience coordinating events for an educational NGO in those regions. Their synergy was evident, and a natural camaraderie shone between them. Listening to Natalie speak with knowledge and passion stirred a strange ache in Ethan. She had always been brilliant and driven, qualities that once attracted him. He remembered how, in the early days of their marriage, he found her philanthropic zeal almost more captivating than her beauty. But success had changed him, and he suspected it had changed her too, though in different ways. Victoria, sensing Ethan's distraction, placed a manicured hand on his arm, smiling. "Ethan's been traveling a lot too, honey. He's looking at new offices in Dubai." She shot a quick glance at Robert's watch, then back at his face, trying to gauge if he was impressed. Ethan forced a smile, reluctant to show any vulnerability. "Yes, Dubai. We've got big investors there." He threw out a few buzzwords about global expansions, but the spark in his voice was absent. The conversation lulled, the tension thick in the air. Then, unexpectedly, a man approached the table. It was the maitre d', accompanied by a discreet staff member, who murmured something about a paparazzi disturbance outside. The maitre d' offered a low apology, explaining that a few known faces at the restaurant tonight had drawn media attention. "Should we move you to a private lounge?" he asked politely, looking between Robert Sterling and Ethan Rhodes. "We want to ensure your privacy and that of your guests." Natalie's heart leaped. She knew any paparazzi photos of the four of them together could ignite a tabloid frenzy. Robert glanced at her, reading her concern. "We'd appreciate that," he replied. They all rose. The staff guided them through a side hallway to a more secluded, luxurious lounge area enclosed by velvet drapes. A grand piano sat in the corner, unoccupied, as soft jazz played through hidden speakers. The lighting was dimmer, more intimate, which added to the sense of claustrophobia. Victoria perched on a velvet couch, crossing her legs elegantly, looking far too pleased with this VIP detour. Ethan stood beside her, but kept casting glances toward Natalie and Robert, who sat on a nearby divan. The staff offered fresh champagne. No one refused. Each sip seemed to sharpen the undercurrents running between them. Finally, Robert broke the silence. "Well, this is unexpected." He managed a wry smile at Natalie, who returned a slight shrug. She wanted to disappear, but she also felt a quiet resolve to show that she wasn't intimidated by Ethan or his lover. Victoria decided to fan the flames. "I remember reading about your divorce settlement, Natalie. Very discreet. But these things always leak, don't they?" Her question was directed at Robert, as if inviting him to speculate. Natalie stiffened. Rage simmered beneath her cool exterior. Robert's brow furrowed. "That's personal, Miss Green." His voice was firm. "I'm sure none of us wants to stoop to gossip." Victoria's lips parted in a slow, cat-like smile. Her gaze flickered to Robert, then back to Natalie, as if calculating her next move. She reveled in the spectacle, and Ethan could see it in the amused glint in her eyes. "Of course, my apologies." The apology sounded hollow. The barely veiled sarcasm dripped from every syllable. Ethan felt an internal swirl of guilt. Had he really allowed someone so malicious and superficial into his life? Had he mistaken confidence for depth and charm for substance? Yet his pride would not let him denounce her in front of Robert and Natalie. Not yet. Instead, he redirected the topic. "So, Robert, how do you balance a personal life with a global empire?" Robert responded with effortless composure. He described how he delegated tasks, stayed in touch with philanthropic boards, and tried to carve out personal time. Natalie listened, reminded again of the synergy between them. Philanthropy, business, a sense of purpose. She cast a fleeting glance at Ethan, whose expression was unreadable. There was a time they had shared a vision of building success for a greater good. They had whispered about creating a foundation, about creating something bigger than themselves. But that dream had been buried under broken promises and misplaced priorities. Now, all that remained was this bizarre display of superiority. The lounge's silence offered no escape from the swirling emotions. They drank their champagne, each one grappling with regrets, insecurities, or anger. And somewhere outside, cameras flashed, capturing snippets of the night's drama for the tabloids to twist and turn. The tension in the private lounge had crystallized. Victoria, determined not to be outshone, peppered Robert with questions about his philanthropic efforts. She tried to impress him, making vague claims of her own charitable interests, something about children's education, though she got stuck when asked for details. Ethan stood beside her, his mind churning. The contrast was stark. Robert and Natalie spoke of these causes with ease, with purpose. Victoria, on the other hand, treated the conversation like a performance, a rehearsed monologue she hadn't quite memorized. Ethan realized how forced Victoria's conversation seemed, especially when compared to the genuine passion Natalie and Robert shared for these causes. It was in that moment that a sharp, uncomfortable truth hit him. Natalie had not just moved on. She had leveled up. And Ethan? Ethan had simply moved sideways. Finally, Robert stood, offering a polite bow of his head. "I need a moment to speak with the maitre d' about ensuring our privacy," he explained. Then, turning to Natalie, his voice softer, more personal. "Would you like to join me?" He wanted to give her an out, an escape from this claustrophobic arrangement. She agreed, offering Ethan one last unreadable look before following Robert toward the maitre d', leaving Ethan and Victoria momentarily alone on the luxurious couch. The silence between them was thick enough to cut. Victoria fiddled with her phone, as if considering a quick selfie to capture her glamorous surroundings. Her reflection shimmered in the mirrored wall next to them, A perfectly poised, perfectly serene, perfectly hollow woman. Ethan's thoughts swirled with regret. He didn't want to be with a woman who only saw him as a wallet and a stepping stone to fame. He had built an empire, yet somehow he had become an accessory to someone else's ambitions. Still, a part of him had chosen this path, drawn in by the superficial glitz when his marriage was failing. Impulsively, he reached out and took Victoria's hand. "Enough with the photos, please." For the first time all night, his voice carried no pretense, no charm, just a quiet, exhausted finality. A flicker of annoyance crossed Victoria's features, but she obeyed. She just wanted one quick. "I said enough." Ethan's voice had an edge to it that startled even himself. He exhaled, forcing a calm. "I'm sorry, it's just, this is complicated." Victoria tilted her body toward him. "Ethan," she said softly, touching his arm. "Is seeing Natalie with that CEO getting to you?" He flinched, uncomfortable with the question, but Victoria pressed on. "Look, I get it. Exes can stir up feelings, especially if they're doing better than you expected. But remember, you're successful too. I'm by your side. Don't let an old flame eclipse what we have." Her words, meant to reassure, only added to his confusion. He wasn't sure what he had with Victoria. She liked the parties, the travel, the lavish gifts. But did she care about him? The man beneath the money? He remembered Natalie's unwavering support in their startup days, how she believed in him before the world did. The wave of longing almost choked him. He brushed Victoria's hand away gently. "Let's not talk about it right now. They'll be back soon." He forced a half smile, but his eyes betrayed the conflict. Victoria, unwilling to have her territory threatened, hid her frustration behind a serene facade. Across the lounge, Robert and Natalie were speaking to the maitre d'. While Robert handled the logistics, Natalie's eyes flickered to the couch, anxious to leave Ethan and Victoria alone. She worried Victoria might provoke drama. Robert noticed her discomfort. "Everything okay?" She offered a small, wry half-smile. "I'm fine. I just never expected to have dinner with my ex-husband and his lover tonight." Robert exhaled sympathetically. "That's a lot to handle. We can leave if you want. I'm sure I can arrange a discreet exit." Natalie considered it. She yearned for an escape. But something inside her also wanted closure. Perhaps facing Ethan and Victoria was a step toward healing. "Let's just end this gracefully," she decided. "We can say our goodbyes and leave." Robert admired her composure. "You're braver than you think," he murmured. She felt a flutter of warmth at his quiet compliment. They returned to the table, where Ethan had adopted a rigid posture beside Victoria. The tension still hung in the air like a static charge. Natalie cleared her throat. "I think Robert and I will be leaving shortly. We have an early event in the morning." Ethan nodded. Relief was mixed with a strange disappointment. Victoria pursed her lips, her gaze sweeping over Natalie's dress. Her stare lingered just long enough to be dismissive, as if silently criticizing every inch of the fabric. "What a shame. The night is young. Are you sure you don't want to stay and catch up a bit more?" Her tone dripped with sarcasm. She seemed to enjoy goading Natalie's discomfort, a viper in silk playing with her prey. Robert smoothly intervened. "Natalie's philanthropic agenda keeps her busy. We'd hate to stay too long." His words were courteous, but his tone left no room for argument. This conversation was over. He turned to Ethan, extending a hand. "It was interesting meeting you. Best of luck with your expansions." Ethan forced a polite nod. "Yes, likewise. Perhaps we'll cross paths again." The words felt hollow, but he tried to salvage dignity, as if uttering them could undo the bitter taste in his mouth. Natalie, not trusting herself to speak more than necessary, simply offered Victoria a cool smile. It wasn't forced. It wasn't theatrical. It was the kind of effortless poise that made Victoria's sting feel small, insignificant. "Enjoy the rest of your evening," she said, mastering her composure. Victoria reciprocated with a saccharine smile. "Oh, we will," she purred. Her fingers tightened around Ethan's wrist, as if she were staking a claim to what was hers. With that, Robert placed a gentle hand on Natalie's back, guiding her through the lounge's velvet curtains. The touch was light, respectful, but to Ethan, it felt like a brand, a silent statement that she was no longer his to protect, to claim, to love. A staff member guided them to a discreet exit, away from the paparazzi. As they glided into the elevator, Natalie let out a shaky sigh of relief. Robert studied her profile. "You're handling this with remarkable grace. I know it's not easy." She gave him a wry half-smile. "Grace is just controlled panic," she murmured. "But I appreciate you stepping in. If you hadn't been there, I might have lost my composure." An unspoken gratitude flickered between them, a sense that Robert was more than a philanthropic partner or a dinner date. He might be a quiet ally in her quest for healing, and maybe, just maybe, something more. Meanwhile, in the lounge, Ethan motioned for a staff member to bring him a strong drink. Victoria rubbed his shoulder in what she considered a comforting gesture. "That went well," she mused, swirling the rest of her champagne. "She seemed a bit flustered, don't you think?" Ethan didn't answer. He stared at the empty hallway where Natalie had disappeared, a whirlwind of jealousy, regret, and a strangely protective longing roaring in his chest. He wasn't sure which feeling was worse. Victoria, sensing his mood, cooed softly. "Don't dwell on your ex. We have a flight to St. Bart's soon, remember? Let's focus on us." Ethan tore his gaze from the curtains, forcing a half-smile. Us. The word felt foreign. Victoria represented everything he once thought he wanted. Excitement, indulgence, freedom. But now, in the lingering echo of Natalie's presence, it all felt empty. Yes, us. But in the back of his mind, Natalie's serene face haunted him. Not the face of the woman he had left behind, but of the one who had moved forward without him. He once had her support, her love. Now she was forging a new path with a man who seemed to appreciate every aspect of her. And Ethan was left wondering if he had ever truly understood what he had lost. The finality of it all gnawed at him, a reminder of the cracks he had allowed to form in his once promising marriage. As the lounge's soft jazz melodies resumed, two very different couples were left to deal with unspoken truths. One couple left the glittering walls behind, stepping into a city full of infinite possibilities. The other remained, anchored to the illusions of a glamorous life, burdened with a growing suspicion that everything glittered far less than it seemed. The tabloids wasted no time, feeding the speculation about the unusual dinner party of 4 at Le Jardin. By the next morning, social media was buzzing with photos of Robert Sterling escorting Natalie Vance out a side door, while Ethan Rhodes and Victoria Green were left behind. Various outlets invented their own narratives. Wealthy tech CEO caught in an awkward encounter with his ex-wife and a hotel magnate. Oh, the frosty gaze of Victoria Green, jealous of the CEO's flirtation with the ex-Mrs. Rhodes. Natalie woke up to a stream of messages from friends offering sympathy or wanting juicy details. She replied politely, stating only that it was a coincidence and they all remained cordial. Deep down, however, she could still feel the tension vibrating. After getting a cup of coffee, she scrolled past the headlines, promising herself not to let the media circus drag her back into anguish. She was scheduled to meet with Robert at his corporate office that day to finalize a philanthropic partnership. Pausing at her reflection in the hallway mirror, she tucked a stray hair behind her ear. She resolved to maintain her composure. Last night's entanglement would not overshadow her professional goals. An hour later, she arrived at the gleaming Santoro International Tower, a skyscraper that symbolized Robert's empire. The executive reception area boasted polished marble floors and minimalist art pieces. A personal assistant guided her to Robert's private meeting room. She expected a formal atmosphere, but Robert greeted her with a warm smile. "Natalie, thanks for coming in. Let's sit." They discussed the planned scholarship fund, resource allocation, and a timeline for official announcements. Despite the business topic, an undercurrent of personal concern loomed. Finally, Robert brought it up. "How are you doing after last night? I hope the media hasn't been hounding you." Natalie sighed. "The tabloids love to invent narratives, but I'll manage. I just appreciate your support. It could have been ugly if you hadn't been there." Robert's expression softened. "You know you can count on me, and I'm sorry you had to face that. It's never easy to run into an ex, especially one with a complicated history." She nodded in gratitude. "I'm lucky to have a true friend on my side." The word friend hung in the air, and Robert's eyes flickered with an unspoken question. Natalie didn't miss the nuance, but she wasn't prepared to define anything more just yet. Instead, she cleared her throat and turned the conversation back to philanthropy, feeling a swirl of conflicting emotions. Friendship? Something deeper? She needed time to process her feelings. In a different part of the city, Ethan Rhodes was languishing in his penthouse, ignoring the business emails piling up. He was supposed to fly to St. Bart's with Victoria in 3 days, but the prospect no longer excited him. Instead, he found himself replaying the image of Natalie with Robert Sterling. She looked truly happy. A pang of regret hit him like a punch to the gut. Victoria was preening around the living room, instructing house staff on what outfits to pack. Occasionally, she would try to engage Ethan. "What do you think of this swimsuit? Or should I bring the diamond set you gave me last month?" He would give her half-hearted answers, stirring a growing dissatisfaction within her. Finally, she plopped down on the sofa next to him, crossing her arms. "Ethan, you've been in a mood ever since we left Le Jardin." She narrowed her eyes. "Is it Natalie? Are you jealous or something?" His immediate reaction was to deny it. "I'm not jealous," he said dryly. But even as he spoke, an inner voice told him otherwise. He was jealous of Robert's unrestrained success, sure, but also of the genuine connection Robert and Natalie seemed to share. "Just ignore them," Victoria scoffed. "Let them talk. We have a flight to paradise soon. Focus on that." She stood, shaking out her hair. "I need to do some last-minute shopping. Are you coming?" Ethan shook his head, feigning busyness. "I have calls." Disappointed but unwilling to waste her day, Victoria left. Alone, Ethan pondered the irony. He was the one who had ended their marriage for a more free and glamorous life. Now, he found himself unfulfilled, yearning for something deeper. He remembered how Natalie once believed in him unconditionally, how they shared late-night conversations about using their wealth to make a difference. With Victoria, those discussions never came up, unless they served some public relations angle. Impulsively, Ethan grabbed his phone and scrolled to a contact he hadn't used since the divorce. Jessica Morgan, a mutual friend who had remained closer to Natalie after everything fell apart. Jessica was known for her no-nonsense advice. Perhaps Ethan just needed to hear from someone who understood the real Natalie. He hesitated. Then he typed a quick message. "Hey Jess, it's Ethan. I know it's been a while. Can we talk?" Seconds turned into minutes. Just as he assumed Jessica would ignore him, a reply popped up. "This is unexpected. Are you okay?" Ethan let out a shaky breath. He typed back. "Not really. I need some perspective." She replied with a brief directive. "Meet me at the Bayview Cafe tomorrow at 4 p.m. Ethan put down his phone, feeling a whirlwind of relief and anxiety. Jessica was notoriously blunt. If he was looking for perspective, she would give it to him, whether it was comfortable or not. Still, he wanted clarity about his feelings for Natalie, about his life with Victoria. Something had to give, or he risked sinking further into regret. He walked over to the bedroom window, staring at the NYC skyline he once found so thrilling. Now, every gleaming building seemed to mock him. Wealth and success had never felt so empty. And as the hours ticked by, a single truth pressed on him. He might have lost something invaluable, and it might be too late to reclaim it. The following afternoon, Ethan arrived at Bayview Cafe, a cozy spot near the waterfront. He saw Jessica Morgan in a corner booth, sipping a latte. When she saw Ethan, her lips tightened into a thin line. Not a smile, not a frown. More like a measured neutrality. Ethan slid into the seat across from her. Jessica set her magazine aside, crossing her arms. "You said you needed perspective," she began bluntly. "So, talk." He rubbed his temples, searching for the right words. "I ran into Natalie last night at Le Jardin." Jessica's expression didn't change. "She was with Robert Sterling." He explained the whirlwind of tension, the forced conversation, and how it unleashed an unsettling jealousy he hadn't anticipated. Jessica raised an eyebrow. "Well, you ended the marriage, remember? If she's moved on, that's her right." Ethan winced. "I know. It's not that I don't want her to be happy. I do. But seeing them together made me realize maybe I made a mistake." Ethan exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. The weight of his own words settled on him like a long overdue reckoning. I never properly appreciated what Natalie and I had. Jessica's gaze sharpened. "Let me guess. Now that you see her with a man who's arguably more successful and philanthropic than you, it's bruising your ego." The sharp observation stung, not because it was unfair, but because it was uncomfortably accurate. Ethan's shoulders slumped. "I guess so," he admitted softly. "I hate feeling overshadowed. But it's more than that. Natalie isn't just a trophy I can't have. She was real." He looked down, his voice choked with regret. "We built something together. It wasn't just about money or appearances, it was a partnership. And I can't help but wonder if I threw it away too easily." A long pause. "And honestly, I'm not even sure if I love Victoria, or if I just love the idea of not being alone." Jessica let out a soft snort. "Wow, that's a healthy foundation for a relationship." She leaned back in her chair, arms still crossed. "Look, Ethan, you know I sided with Natalie after the divorce because I saw what you did to her. You left her shattered. And you," she pointed a finger at him, "were unshaken. You were so damn wrapped up in your shiny new millionaire lifestyle that you didn't even notice." Ethan swallowed. Hearing it so bluntly turned his stomach. Jessica's voice softened slightly. "So what are you asking me exactly? If you should try to get her back?" His throat tightened. "Would it even matter?" He let out a humorless laugh. "She's with Robert Sterling. They look stable. I don't want to sabotage her happiness." Jessica took a slow sip of her latte, watching him intently. "Natalie's a grown woman. She's moved past the heartbreak. And I know Robert respects her. She doesn't owe you anything." Jessica's voice was firm, unyielding. "If you're hoping for some easy redemption arc, forget it. And if this is just about your bruised ego, do everyone a favor and walk away now." Ethan breathed in shakily, feeling both gratitude and shame. Jessica always had a way of cutting through the noise, of holding up a mirror to his worst tendencies. It was why he'd asked for perspective. "You're right," he admitted. His voice was low. The words felt like glass in his throat, but they needed to be said. "It's not just ego. I regret how I let success overshadow what mattered." He let out a sigh, his hands tightening around the untouched coffee cup. "But I don't want to be the villain in her story anymore." Jessica's gaze was strangely compassionate. "Then talk to her," she said. "Apologize, with no expectations. If there's any chance for a new chapter, it starts with honesty." They talked for another half hour, dissecting the complexities. Jessica offered a final warning. "Don't forget, Robert is not a fling. He's a powerful man who could give Natalie everything she once dreamed of with you, minus the drama." The words weighed heavily on Ethan, but they also crystallized his resolve. After Jessica left, Ethan remained, staring at the foam swirling in his untouched coffee. He pulled out his phone and typed a message to his assistant. Cancel the trip to St. Bart's with Victoria. If he was going to face the internal emotional chaos, he needed to stop running to tropical distractions. Still, how would Victoria react? Probably with fury, or worse, cunning. He had to handle that too. But first, he needed to find a genuine way to speak with Natalie, perhaps invite her for coffee, or, even better, a safe, neutral place where they could talk alone. He had no illusions that a single conversation could fix everything, but it could be the first step toward redemption, or final closure. As he walked out of the cafe, a vague sense of clarity settled over him. The hustle and bustle of the city felt less suffocating, more like a symphony of possibilities. He realized that real success wasn't about having the best table at Le Jardin or the most ostentatious penthouse. It was about forging meaningful connections, living with integrity, and maybe, just maybe, finding a love that lasted beyond the novelty of wealth. Ethan looked at his phone. His heart was pounding. The message he had just typed felt too raw, too vulnerable. "Natalie, it's Ethan. Can we meet for coffee? Just to talk." He hovered over the send button. Memories of their last encounter at Le Jardin flooded his mind. Natalie, radiant and confident, with Robert Sterling by her side. A pang of jealousy and regret twisted inside him. But if he wanted any sense of closure or forgiveness, he needed to take this step. Finally, he hit send. To his surprise, her reply came minutes later. "When and where?" Relief was mixed with nerves. He proposed they meet at Central Park the next day. She accepted, concise and calm, not giving away much about her emotions. That night, Ethan barely slept, torn between hope and fear. The next afternoon, bright sunlight illuminated Central Park. Families picnicked on the grass, and joggers lapped the pond. Ethan chose a bench near the fountain, where water sprayed in elegant arcs. Clinging to a latte he could barely taste, he scanned the crowd. Soon, he saw her. Natalie walked toward him, the crisp morning air carrying the scent of fresh coffee and damp earth. She wore a simple blouse and jeans, exuding an understated elegance, the kind of effortless grace that had always set her apart. Ethan stood as she reached him, searching her face for any sign of warmth. "Thanks for coming," he said softly. She sat on the bench, deliberately leaving a space between them. "I'm curious why you wanted to see me," she replied, her voice steady and controlled. Ethan inhaled. For a moment, he thought of all the unspoken regrets that had piled up in the months since their divorce. Every sleepless night, every moment he had convinced himself he had moved on, only to be confronted by the silent ache that never left. "I needed to properly apologize," he began. "I hurt you in ways I can't completely undo. I let success consume me, and I took our marriage for granted." Natalie's gaze flickered to the fountain. "I appreciate that," she said, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup as if clinging to the earth. "But apologies can't erase everything." He nodded. "I know. I'm not expecting you to forget what happened, or to give me another chance. I just can't keep pretending I'm okay with how we ended things. Seeing you at Le Jardin, It shook me. Silence settled between them, punctuated only by the fountain's splash. Ethan had always hated silence. He was a man of business, of negotiations, of quick solutions. But here, in this moment, there was nothing to negotiate. Only the wreckage of what he had lost. Natalie studied his face. She remembered when they were newly married, brimming with shared dreams, late-night conversations over takeout, the way he used to write small notes and tuck them into her books, the man who once held her hand in crowded rooms before he started leaving her behind. But those dreams had dissolved under the weight of Ethan's ambition. "I'm not the same person I was," she said softly. "I've built a new life, working with charities and, well, connecting with Robert." A flicker of jealousy crossed Ethan's features, but he forced a pale smile. "He seems like a good man." His voice was even, but Natalie caught the way his fingers curled slightly into fists. "I want you to be happy, I really do." Natalie's eyes narrowed, unsure if she believed him. "Then why now?" Ethan exhaled, struggling with the admission. "Because I ended things with Victoria." She blinked, absorbing that. He hesitated, then looked at her. "I woke up one day and realized I'd surrounded myself with superficial pursuits, with rooms full of people, and yet I felt completely alone. It took me too long to see that I was chasing something meaningless." He looked away, his voice thick. "But seeing you, thriving, passionate about your causes, it reminded me how far I've strayed from who I wanted to be." A gust of wind whispered through the trees, carrying the weight of the unspoken words. Emotions churned in Natalie's chest, compassion, caution, and a lingering ache. She cleared her throat. "Ethan, I'm glad you're realizing these things, but it doesn't change the past." He swallowed. "I'm not asking you to. I just wanted to own my mistakes and let you know that I admire what you've become. If there's any way I can support your charity work, I'd like to, even if we never get back together." His voice trembled slightly. "Thank you," Natalie said. The sincerity in his words took her by surprise. "That means more than you know." For a moment they sat in silence, each remembering better days before the betrayal and the heartbreak. A breeze rustled the leaves overhead, and a faint laugh echoed from across the park. Finally, Natalie spoke. "I accept your apology, but I'm moving forward, Ethan. With or without Robert. I've learned to stand on my own. I hope you find your own path too." He nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "That's all I wanted. A chance to make things right, even if it's just words. Thank you for listening." They rose from the bench, their coffees untouched. She gave him a small, nostalgic smile. "Take care." He offered a hesitant wave. Then, he turned to leave. Natalie stood there, watching him blend into the crowd, unsure whether to feel relief or a lingering sense of loss. The rhythmic spray of the fountain glistened in the sun as she exhaled, her heart feeling lighter than before. Perhaps they finally had the closure they needed, and perhaps she was finally free to embrace her future, wherever it took her. The new chapter weeks passed, and the dramatic encounter at Le Jardin faded from public chatter. Natalie Vance immersed herself in her work at the NGO, orchestrating a high-profile charity gala that promised to deliver significant funds for youth education. Each day, she woke up feeling more secure in who she was. No longer the ex of Ethan Rhodes, but a competent and respected organizer in the philanthropic world. She rarely thought about the coffee meeting in Central Park. Still, the conversation lingered in her mind. Ethan's apology had given her a sense of closure. It was no longer a looming shadow of guilt or pain. For once, she felt free to explore new possibilities without baggage. Robert Sterling's presence in her life also intensified. They had continued to collaborate on various projects, and with each interaction, She saw more of his sincere character. He was wealthy, yes, but also principled and empathetic. Whenever she felt overwhelmed by event logistics, Robert was there with practical advice, or even a comforting hand on her shoulder. Slowly, the lines between professional and personal blurred. The day of the charity gala arrived. Held in the dazzling ballroom of a historic hotel, the event brought together philanthropists, celebrities, and key figures. Natalie wore a midnight blue dress, her hair swept into a loose bun. She moved through the crowd, ensuring every detail was perfect. The silent auction, the keynote speakers, the sumptuous dinner service. On stage, Natalie introduced Robert for a speech on the impact of strategic giving. His words resonated with the audience, emphasizing how wealth could be turned into a tool for social good. When the program ended, Robert found Natalie amid the guests. He guided her to a quieter alcove with high windows overlooking the city. "You did an outstanding job." His voice was warm. "We surpassed our fundraising goal." She exhaled, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. "I'm relieved and thrilled. Thank you for all your support. Without your hotel group's sponsorship, we wouldn't have reached these numbers." He smiled, leaning closer. "There's something I've been wanting to ask you." His tone softened. "When all this settles down, can I take you to dinner? A real dinner, not a working meal or a quick bite between meetings." His hazel eyes were brimming with sincerity. Natalie felt her cheeks flush. After her divorce, she had sworn off romance for a while, hesitant to trust again. But Robert wasn't Ethan. He stood before her with genuine kindness, not just charm. She found herself nodding. "I would like that very much." They sealed it with a shared laugh, the air tinged with promise. A feeling of excitement fluttered in Natalie's chest. Perhaps she was ready for something more than professional camaraderie. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Ethan Rhodes stood in front of a modest community center. He had made a large donation in secret, funding new computers and science kits for underprivileged children, a cause he and Natalie once dreamed of supporting together. Now, he was carrying that dream forward alone, determined to find meaning in giving back. Watching the children eagerly explore the newly equipped rooms brought a rare smile to his face. He thought of Natalie, wondering if she would ever find out about this. A part of him hoped she would, not for praise, but for a subtle understanding that he was trying to be the man he should have been all along. Later that night, Ethan returned to his penthouse to find it quiet. Gone were the parties and the superficial gatherings that once filled it. He made a simple dinner for himself, reflecting on how his priorities had shifted so dramatically. Victoria Green was long gone, on to the next lavish scene, presumably. Ethan realized that maybe being alone wasn't so bad if he could fill the emptiness with purpose, whether through volunteer work, therapy, or forming genuine friendships. A month after the gala, Natalie and Robert sat at an intimate corner table in a small, little-known French bistro. Unlike Le Jardin, this place had no lurking paparazzi or extravagant decor, just soft lighting and excellent cuisine. No grand chandeliers, no gold leaf menus, just warmth, authenticity, and the kind of atmosphere where real conversations flourished. With shared laughs and stories, Natalie and Robert discovered how much they complemented each other. The comfort between them was undeniable, organic, effortless. It wasn't about status or appearances. It was about something much rarer, something real. From values on philanthropy to personal passions like traveling and reading, they found synchronicity in the smallest details. When they finally walked out hand in hand, Natalie felt a lightness fill her heart. Not the fleeting rush of infatuation, but the steady calm of something solid, something worth building. She looked up at the moonlit sky, a quiet smile pulling at her lips. Not so long ago, she had stood under the same sky, feeling completely lost, as if her world had shattered beyond repair. Remembering the heartbreak she once believed was insurmountable, she realized that perhaps life really could begin again after crushing disappointment. There, under the soft glow of the city lights, she realized she was no longer haunted by the past, no longer defined by what she had lost, but by what she had found. She had found a new horizon, one shaped by mutual respect, renewed purpose, and the thrilling possibility that this time, love could last. A final message. Thank you for joining us on this emotional roller coaster of love, betrayal, and the rediscovery of purpose. Natalie's journey reminds us that heartbreak can lead to transformative growth. That true wealth isn't measured by lavish dinners or dazzling possessions, but by the strength of our bonds, the depth of our character, and the courage to walk away from what no longer serves us. Even when the past unexpectedly collides with the present, as it did in that fateful restaurant, we always have a choice to either stay in regret or to move forward towards something new. If Natalie, Ethan, and Robert's story captivated you, hit the like button to let us know. Share this video with friends who love heartwarming and dramatic stories, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more stories that explore the depths of love, ambition, and redemption. Your engagement keeps our channel thriving. What would you have done in Natalie's place? Let us know in the comments.